The raid that shook the palace. On the night of August 8, 2022, a convoy of unmarked black SUVs rolled quietly through Palm Beach. The island's manicured streets, normally home to Bentleys, golf carts, and golden hour joggers, fell into an uncanny silence. Locals looked out through drawn curtains. They knew the direction those headlights were heading. Everyone knew. At the end of a winding, torch-lit driveway stood a mansion so oversized, so ornate, so impossible that locals had once dismissed it as a billionaire's hallucination. But on that night, it wasn't just a mansion. It was a flashpoint, a battleground, a fuse connected directly to the heart of American power. The FBI crossed the threshold of Mar-a-Lago, moving through its gilded corridors, past ceilings imported from Renaissance estates, past oil portraits and grand arches dripping in gold leaf. Their search warrants called for classified documents. But the symbolism of the act, federal agents inside a former president's private palace, was bigger than any file. It raised a deeper question, a more haunting one. One Palm Beach insiders had whispered for decades. Why does this house keep dragging its owners into conflict? Why does Mar-a-Lago, beautiful, extravagant, almost mythic, seem to generate power struggles like a machine built for war? Because underneath the fountains, underneath the marble, underneath the 110,000 square feet of curated fantasy, lies a truth almost no one talks about. Mar-a-Lago was never designed as a home. It was engineered as a weapon, and every person who picks it up ends up fighting a new battle. This is the story of how America's most disturbing mansion became a crucible of ambition, a palace that destroys some, elevates others, and refuses to stay quiet. But to understand why, we need to rewind a century, to the one woman who believed she could control it, the heiress who built a throne before politicians, billionaires, and federal agents stalked its halls. Mar-a-Lago belonged to an heiress with a smile that lit up newspaper society pages and a reputation for getting exactly what she wanted. Marjorie Merriweather Post, serial heiress, philanthropist, and at one point the richest woman in the United States, was accustomed to command. By 1920, she had survived 2 marriages, inherited a national food empire, and controlled more wealth than nearly any woman in American history. But she wanted something more elusive, a seat of power that was unmistakably hers. Palm Beach at the time was a paradise for the elite. Mansions sprouted like marble flowers along the coast. But Marjorie looked across the island and felt a familiar dissatisfaction. Everything felt too small, too safe, too temporary. So she made a decision that shocked even her closest friends. She would build a mansion so massive, so decadent, and so unmistakably symbolic that no one, not even history, could ignore her. She hired the flamboyant Austrian architect Joseph Urban, fresh from Broadway sets and opera houses. His buildings didn't just stand upright, they performed. Marjorie didn't want a house. She wanted a throne, a base of operations, a center of gravity so powerful it could pull presidents into orbit. Urban looked at Palm Beach's narrow barrier island, thin land, shifting sand, unpredictable storms, and told her the truth. This will be unbelievably difficult. Marjorie's eyes gleamed. Good, she said. It should be. But what Urban didn't know was that Marjorie had a plan even grander than the mansion itself. A plan involving the United States government. A plan involving power. And a plan she intended to keep secret. at least until the palace was built. An empire carved out of sand to construction started in 1924, and Palm Beach residents could only stare. From the dunes rose a structure that made everything else look miniature. A sprawling 110,000 square foot fortress linked the Atlantic Ocean to the intracoastal waterway, literally sea to lake. The name wrote itself: Mar-a-Lago. Workers carved 75-foot towers, imported European frescoes, installed marble floors from Italy and Spain, and pieced together more than 36,000 antique tiles. The mansion swallowed up federal-sized budgets. When storms hit, sections had to be rebuilt. When salt water ate into the stonework, special teams flew in from Europe. But Marjorie pushed harder. She wanted visiting dignitaries to walk in and feel overwhelmed, subdued, not by charm, but by scale. She wanted awe to do her talking for her. Palm Beach's old money whispered behind fans and cocktails. She is building a palace. She wants to host royalty. She is trying to force her way into the history books. They were not entirely wrong. By the time the last tile was set in 1927, Mar-a-Lago had become the largest mansion in Palm Beach history, and one of the most expensive personal residences in the country. But then Marjorie revealed her real ambition, the secret she had been waiting to unveil. The winter White House that wasn't, in private conversations, in quiet letters, and finally in legal documents, Marjorie declared her vision. Mar-a-Lago would one day belong to the United States. A presidential retreat, a diplomatic headquarters, a southern White House. She believed presidents needed a place that matched the scale of American power, and none of the government's existing estates were even close. Her will formalized it. The mansion would transfer to the federal government upon her death. But Washington, famously allergic to expensive gifts with giant maintenance bills, said nothing. They smiled politely at Marjorie's gallus, praised her philanthropy, and avoided acknowledging the mammoth obligation she was pressing into their hands. Mar-a-Lago was more than a gift. It was a challenge, a massive, glittering dare. And it would not be long before the government tried desperately to refuse it. But Marjorie did not live long enough to see the battle play out. The gift the government tried to flee. When Marjorie died in 1973, her lawyers delivered the news. The U.S. government now owned a 110,000 square foot crisis. Federal officials toured the property and immediately panicked. The roof needed constant repair. Storms jeopardized the structure every year. Salt air ate through the mansion like acid. Upkeep exceeded $1 million a year in 1970s money. The Coast Guard warned it was too exposed. The Secret Service warned it was indefensible. The National Park Service warned it was unsustainable. Behind closed doors, Washington officials struggled to answer a simple question: what do we do with this thing? For years, they tried. For years, it drained budgets. For years, they quietly resented the heiress who had forced them to babysit a palace. By the early 1980s, they reached their conclusion. They wanted out. The government petitioned to return Mar-a-Lago to the Post Foundation. They framed it as pragmatic. But Palm Beach insiders understood what it really was: a surrender. Marjorie's throne had no ruler. Her dream of state power had collapsed. The mansion sat in limbo, beautiful, vacant, deteriorating. And that is when a young New York developer began circling overhead, like a shark that had smelled opportunity. The deal-maker in the shadows, Donald J. Trump, then 34 years old, was not yet a political figure. He was a developer, hungry, sharp-elbowed. building a reputation for landing deals other people thought impossible. To Trump, Mar-a-Lago was not a decaying relic. It was leverage incarnate. But the foundation was not interested in selling. Others had tried, and all had been rejected. So Trump made a different move, one that would become legendary in Palm Beach real estate circles. He quietly bought the beachfront parcel directly in front of Mar-a-Lago, blocking the estate's ocean views. Then he announced very publicly that he might build something huge there. Condo towers, a mansion, something that would ruin Mar-a-Lago's vista forever. The foundation panicked, negotiations reopened, and in 1985, Trump bought Mar-a-Lago for what newspapers called astonishingly low. Some said he had outplayed Palm Beach's elite. Others said he had simply been willing to be bolder. But Trump had inherited the same problem the government had faced. Mar-a-Lago drained money like a wounded animal. He poured millions into renovations, restoring gold leaf, repairing centuries-old fixtures, and trying to revive the place as a private residence. It was not enough. The house was too big, too demanding, too expensive. So Trump, never afraid of reinvention, changed the plan. The club that broke Palm Beach. In 1995, Trump unveiled a transformation no one saw coming. Mar-a-Lago would become a private club, but not just any club. A club that broke Palm Beach tradition. A club that shattered old money exclusivity. A club open to anyone who could pay and pass Trump's scrutiny. Inside Palm Beach's social hierarchy, this was war. Old guard establishments like the Everglades Club had operated by invisible rules, heritage, lineage, religion, unwritten lists of who belonged. Trump bulldozed all of it. He welcomed diverse members. He invited celebrities, athletes, business moguls, media personalities. He brought flash into a world built on understatement. While other clubs whispered, Mar-a-Lago roared. Membership soared. Gala nights filled tabloids. The estate glowed again, powered by a new kind of electricity, ambition, spectacle, modern wealth. But even success had a price. Neighbors sued over noise. Town officials battled Trump over zoning. Historic preservation boards clashed with the mansion's ever-shifting demands. Mar-a-Lago was alive again and hungry for conflict. But the biggest battle was still ahead. Because in the late 2000s, Donald Trump began considering something nobody in Palm Beach took seriously at first. A run for president. And Mar-a-Lago, built as a throne, began to behave like one. The palace enters politics. During the 2016 campaign, reporters flocked to Mar-a-Lago. They wanted to know why Donald Trump kept calling it the Winter White House. Was it branding, showmanship, or something deeper? After the election, the answer came quickly. Foreign leaders visited. Presidential meetings took place in the ornate dining room. Diplomacy unfolded under chandeliers and Floridian sunlight. Mar-a-Lago became an active symbol of Trump's power, a second stage, a Southern command center. It was exactly what Marjorie Merriweather Post had imagined, but it came with consequences she never foresaw. Security experts warned the estate was porous. Ethics watchdogs warned about conflicts of interest. Intelligence officials cautioned about surveillance risks in a club setting. Mar-a-Lago was no longer just a home or a club. It had become a geopolitical asset and a vulnerability. Every person who crossed its gates brought agendas. Every room became a backdrop for stories the public only half understood. All while storms approached. Legal storms, political storms, personal storms. And one day in August 2022, those storms made landfall. The day the palace was breached. The FBI entry into Mar-a-Lago in August 2022 was a moment of cinematic tension, one that felt almost designed for history books. Agents moved through hallways gilded in gold, past walls once lined with Post's artifacts, past club members' dining spaces, into storage rooms and basements where political documents might have been kept. It was a clash of two institutions, a former president's power versus the power of law, personal authority versus federal authority. But the deeper story was not the search itself. It was what Mar-a-Lago had become, a house that sits at the crossroads of politics, celebrity, national security, personal ambition, and historical myth. A house that refuses to be neutral. A house that pulls every owner into some kind of battle, legal, social, or political. For Post, it was the battle to make her legacy permanent. For the US government, it was the battle to escape the burden she built. For Donald Trump, it became a battleground of identity, influence, and national debate. Every owner of Mar-a-Lago enters thinking they will control it, but history suggests something else. The house changes them, not the other way around. The palace that thrives on conflict. Today, Mar-a-Lago sits in the sun like a sleeping giant. Tourists photograph its gates. Members sip cocktails beneath soaring arches. Politicians, celebrities, and power brokers drift through its corridors. But behind the glamour lies something more unsettling. Mar-a-Lago has survived every crisis. Hurricanes, lawsuits, bankruptcies, political upheavals. It survived because conflict is not a threat to it. Conflict is its oxygen. The house thrives on battles, legal battles, social battles, political battles, architectural battles, even battles against time itself. And in a strange way that makes it one of the most American structures in existence, a symbol of ambition with a cost, a monument to wealth that demands more wealth, a palace that promises power but requires constant war. Marjorie wanted a presidential retreat. She got something far more complicated, a stage where every actor believes they are the main character, until the house reminds them otherwise. Conclusion: the real secret of Mar-a-Lago. It is not hidden papers. It is not scandals. It is not even politics. The real secret is structural, psychological, and unavoidable. Mar-a-Lago was engineered for power, and power always attracts conflict. It is a battleground disguised as a palace, a dream built to amplify ambition, a throne built without a clear successor. And every person who sits on that throne, from the heiress who built it to the mogul who reinvented it, to the nation that cannot stop watching it. It is forced to answer a single question. Do they control Mar-a-Lago, or does Mar-a-Lago control them? In the end, the mansion always wins, because palaces don't change, people do. And this palace, this strange, glittering, storm-beaten fortress standing between sea and lake, has outlived every battle thrown at it. It is still standing, still watching, still waiting for the next fight. A house built for power, a house drawn to conflict, a house that refuses to die. Mar-a-Lago endures, and the story isn't finished.